is to reduce petroleum usage and promote alternative fuels and related vehicles and infrastructure in the greater Yellowstone area. So we work to reduce energy consumption and harmful emissions by increasing sustainable transportation efforts in Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho. So I'm just going to touch on a couple electric vehicle and infrastructure related success stories throughout our region that just show the potential for electric vehicles in the Intermountain West. So for my first slide, I'm going to be talking about START. And so START stands for Southern Teton Area Rapid Transit, and it's the public bus system for the town of Jackson in Teton County. And so this past year, START Bus replaced 8 vehicles in its diesel fleet with all-electric Proterra buses. And this was through a $2.3 million federal grant from the U.S. Department of Transportation's Low or No Emissions Grant Program. And so START also committed to transitioning to 40% electric by the year 2022. And so as an organization, Yellowstone-Teton Clean Cities was able to provide the emissions calculations and to help write and edit the narrative and write the language for this 2022 goal for START. And so they are on track to meet this goal because they're getting 4 more electric buses also with the federal low no emissions grant funding. And so that will meet their 2022 goal of all electric. And they will also be receiving 2 more electric buses through the Teton County Build Grant. And these electric Proterra buses that they have in Jackson, they got this past year, were the first battery electric buses in the state of Wyoming. So it's a pretty cool success story for them. And next, I'll be talking about the automated shuttle pilot in Yellowstone National Park. So this past June in Yellowstone, they launched an autonomous electric shuttle service, and it's called TEDdy. And this stands for the Electric Driverless Demonstration in Yellowstone. And so the shuttle is made by Beep, which is a motor vehicle company that makes fully autonomous shuttles. And the shuttle is a first generation autonomous vehicle, and they're already making the 3rd generation of this vehicle. And they got funding for this through an internal grant from the Department of Transportation for the National Park Service. But the idea of the shuttle is that it will test out the feasibility and the sustainability of autonomous transportation in national parks. And so the data collected from this pilot shuttle will help inform the development of the next generation of autonomous shuttles. And so once an analysis of the shuttle has been completed, Yellowstone-Teton Clean Cities staff will provide outreach and communications and just help further that once they finish their analysis. And then next, I'll be talking about some DC fast charging stations. So direct current fast charging is commonly referred to as DC fast charging, and it's the fastest charging available to charge an electric vehicle. So DC fast charging can charge an electric vehicle up to 80% of its battery in an hour or less of charging time. And so there are currently 3 types of DC fast charging. There's combined charging system, CCS, CHAdeMO, and Tesla supercharger. So Yellowstone-Teton Clean Cities helped work with the town of Jackson here in Jackson to secure funding to install 2 DC fast charging stations locally. So we have 2 now located in our local parking garage, and they're open to the public for charging. And so these are the only 2 in the state of Wyoming that have both the DC fast charging connection ports. So they have the CCS and the CHAdeMO. And there is another one in Cheyenne at a Harley-Davidson, but it doesn't have both of them. And these were funded by a local special purpose excise tax and energy mitigation funding and other general funds. And then lastly, I'll be talking about a program that we launched this past summer called the Electric Vehicle Experience Program. So Yellowstone-Teton Clean Cities was awarded a grant by Teton Conservation District here in Jackson to offer the Electric Vehicle Experience Program. And so we partnered with Lower Valley Energy to host and develop the program, as well as another local organization, Energy Conservation Works, to support our program development. And this program allows Lower Valley Energy Co-op members, which is our local energy cooperative, to test drive an electric vehicle for free. And so they can learn about the technology and determine if the electric vehicle fits their daily driving needs. And so this free program allows individuals 1 to 3 days to try out the 2020 Chevrolet Bolt. And it has a range of over 250 miles, and then it's free charging at numerous stations in town provided by the town of Jackson and Teton County and other local businesses. And so we just started this program, but it will run for 3 years. And currently dealerships in Jackson and surrounding areas don't really have electric vehicles on their lot available for test drives. So the idea of this program was just to provide access to those interested in test driving an electric vehicle and to answer like any questions they have through firsthand experience. And for the town of Jackson, we commissioned a 2019 emissions report and found out that 65% of our emissions here are attributed to ground transportation. And so driving an electric vehicle in Teton County can reduce those emissions by 96% for your vehicle. And with Lower Valley Energy, the local energy cooperative has a clean electrical grid mix. And if you use that, you can also reduce your tailpipe emissions to zero. So we thought that was a cool opportunity to showcase what an electric vehicle can do to reduce your emissions. And so we already have people signed up to test out the Chevy Bolt for this program through the spring of next year. And we still have a lot of local interest. So yeah, those are just some success stories of projects that we've been a part of in the past year related to electric vehicles. And overall, Yellowstone-Teton Clean Cities is just a resource in the greater Yellowstone area for everything related to alternative fuels, electric vehicles, and related infrastructure. So we're just happy to do that. And please reach out if you have any comments or questions about these projects. We'll have a questions portion at the end of the webinar. And I also just wanted to mention that next Thursday, October 7th, we are hosting our fall stakeholder meeting. It's from 1 to 5, and it'll be a Zoom meeting. And at the meeting, we'll talk with different industry experts and local project leaders and some researchers from the Idaho National Laboratory. And you can register for the stakeholder meeting on our website, which I can put the link in our chat. Yeah, so it would be great if anyone could attend that as well. And now I'm going to hand off to Neil with the Montana Department of Environmental Quality.
Thank you, Bailey. Again, my name is Neil Woman. I'm an energy resource professional at the Montana Department of Environmental Quality's Energy Office. And earlier this week, we announced 2 new funding opportunities. And one of them in particular I want to focus on because we're hoping that we're going to get a lot of interest for electric vehicles through this funding opportunity. It's called the Clean Truck, Bus, and Airport Equipment Program, which is funded by Montana's portion of the Volkswagen Environmental Mitigation Trust settlement. It's a total funding opportunity of almost $7.4 million, and it's focusing on the replacement of older diesel vehicles that are class 4 through 8 trucks or buses, as well as airport ground support equipment. So we're hoping to get a lot of interest. The first application deadline won't be until January, so hopefully local entities here in Montana will have plenty of time to plan their application and look at what kind of options are out there, because there's plenty of them. So just as quick background, folks may be aware of the Volkswagen settlement here in Montana. We were awarded $12.6 million. The settlement nationwide is focusing on replacing and funding for medium and heavy duty diesel replacements, as well as electric charging stations. The focus is reducing NOx emissions from mobile sources, so from vehicles and airport ground support equipment, for example, as well as investing in clean alternative fuels and infrastructure and achieving long-term air quality benefits. The funding for the Clean Truck, Bus, and Airport Equipment RFA request for applications is primarily from this green part of the pie. So in Montana, we set aside money for electric charging stations, as well as marketing, education, administration of the fund. But then the vast majority of it was on vehicle replacements. And so that's what we're hoping to do in the next several months. Again, the focus is on NOx emission reductions and improving air quality. For this request for applications, we're hoping to award grants of up to $500,000, depending on the project that excuse me, is being proposed. And we'll get into that in just a moment. We've split the funding opportunity up into 4 different categories. Categories A and B are for, A is for on-road trucks, class 4 through 8, which basically means a weight of 14,001 pounds or greater. And examples of that include garbage trucks, dump trucks, street sweepers, delivery trucks, concrete mixers, work trucks, bucket trucks. There's all kinds of different applications you can think of for these classes. And the eligible replacements would be engine model years 92 through 2009. And then the other part of this slide is category B, which is focusing on buses, shuttle and transit buses. Again, class 4 through 8 buses, 92 through 09 engine model years. For both of these categories, you can see the cost share that we're offering here, up to 85% for government-owned vehicles or 75% for non-government. So for an electric transit bus, and Jordan's going to talk about them in just a moment, the price for an all-electric transit bus right now is around $700,000 to $800,000, depending on manufacturer, what kind of bells and whistles you purchase with it. And so we couldn't fund 85% of that, but we could certainly give $500,000 to offset and match the cost of that all-electric bus. And we could also do a new diesel replacement or an alternate fuel. So for all these different applications for alternate fuels, you're generally talking about compressed natural gas, CNG, propane, in some cases, liquefied natural gas. And that has a different cost share. You can see that we're really focusing on all electric replacements with this funding opportunity. The next category, category C, is school buses. So we took this out of category B and made it its own category. And with school buses, we can replace older diesel school buses, which are engine model year 2009 or older, and replace them with all electric. That's the only fuel that would be available for this funding opportunity is all electric. Basically, if you look at a brand new diesel school bus these days, they cost around $80,000 to $100,000, again, depending on what kind of features you get with it. And a new all-electric bus, school bus, would cost about $350,000. With this cost share of 85%, if the school district applies for this funding opportunity, the school district could get an all-new electric bus for around $55,000. They would have to put up $55,000. We would be able to put up the other 85%, the remaining cost of it. Non-government schools, we're not quite sure who would qualify for that. But we just want to make sure that there is an option there. But basically, school districts that would apply would be eligible for up to 85%. And for any electric vehicle project in this funding opportunity, the grant award can also include paying for the cost of the electric charging station that would be dedicated to that vehicle. So if, for example, a transit agency, a school district, a local government like a municipality, a city government wanted to purchase an electric vehicle with this funding opportunity, they could also use part of the grant award for the charging station cost. Category D is the airport ground support equipment. This is the one exception within the funding opportunity where you could replace a gasoline powered piece of equipment for airport ground support equipment. Otherwise, for the other 3 categories, we can only replace diesel. But for airport ground support equipment, whether you're talking about belt loaders, pushback tractors, or things that basically support airport or airplanes while they're on the ground in between flights, we can fund up to 70% for government owned. So if there's an airport that is operated by the local government, then they would qualify for up to 70%. Under the settlement requirements, states like Montana that have received the settlement funding can only replace ground support equipment with all electric. But thankfully, there's plenty of options out there. They're very cost competitive with a gasoline or diesel piece of equipment. So for this category, category D, we can replace older ground support equipment with new electric powered ground support equipment. So that's very exciting. Just to give folks a sense of what kind of things, what kind of improvements you would see with these different technologies using the Argonne National Labs A-Fleet tool, as well as the U.S. Department of Energy's Alternative Fuels Data Center. You can see what the cost range is for these different types of vehicles. This happens to be school buses. Using figures from both Argonne as well as DOE, you can see what the fuel cost per mile is for each of these different vehicles. Now with battery electric, because electric prices are generally pretty stable compared to diesel or gasoline prices, which change with the season, depending on market forces, electric prices stay relatively the same. And so you see a very, very low fuel cost per mile. Now that fuel cost per mile does not include the maintenance savings as well. The one another benefit of electric vehicles, whether you're talking about a Tesla or a Chevy Bolt, like what Yellowstone-Teton cities is demonstrating, or an all-electric school bus, is that there's very, very few moving parts and there's very little maintenance involved. You don't have to change the air filters or the spark plugs, for example. And so with these, you not only get the fuel cost savings, but there's also maintenance savings. Also, battery electric vehicles are much more efficient. And so with the Argonne tool, they estimate that a battery electric school bus can get about 24 miles per gallon equivalent. And if you compare that to gasoline, propane, or diesel, it's significantly improved. Also, of course, the air emissions, when you're talking about the students riding on the bus drivers themselves, kids and parents, when you're dropping off kids at school, you're going to see significant reductions in not only greenhouse gas emissions, but also those NOx emissions that the Volkswagen settlement is so focused on doing. With diesel buses, on an annual basis, you're seeing about 37, almost 38 pounds of NOx emissions per year. You would see a significant reduction with gas or propane, but with battery electric, there are no tailpipe emissions. And so you see a significant reduction there. Just to make sure that people understand that this funding opportunity is not just for buses or school buses, I also pulled information for garbage trucks. Again, a battery electric garbage truck up front will cost a bit more than its other counterparts. But again, you see significant fuel cost savings. It's 2.5 cents per mile of fuel cost compared to the $1.91 cost for a diesel. Again, you also see fuel economy savings. They're big, heavy vehicles, and they're getting heavier as they continue on their routes. And so they're not going to be very efficient in general. But when you compare a battery electric at 5.6 miles per gallon equivalent to a diesel or compressed natural gas, it's 1.7 miles per gallon. That's a significant increase. And then also with the nature of a garbage truck, which is constant start and stop, again, any electric vehicle has an amazing efficiency where you're regenerating your battery using the brakes. And so when you're constantly stopping, a couple of times every block, or you're just going downhill and getting to the next house, you're actually going to be basically refueling your garbage truck as you're driving, as you're doing this constant start and stop. And again, the air emissions is absolute night and day when you're talking about an electric vehicle or electric garbage truck. The greenhouse gas emissions is a significant reduction, and the NOx reductions are really amazing, even better than an electric school bus compared to a diesel school bus. And this is kind of the norm across all these different funding opportunities or categories that we have within the clean truck, bus, and airport equipment RFA, whether you're talking about a bucket truck, a street sweeper, transit bus, school bus, or a garbage truck in this case. So we're very excited about this. Again, we're going to have 2 rounds of funding or application deadlines. The first one will be in January. That kind of gives entities, whether they're private or public nonprofits, local governments, counties, cities, towns, tribal governments, the time to plan and see what's out there. But really, when I'm talking about all these different types of vehicles or airport ground support equipment, there is the technology out there. There are vehicles out there that can do any of these things, which is very exciting. And so, but we do want to make sure that entities that may apply have the time to look around, see what's available, see what makes sense for them. I know, for example, here in Montana, there are local governments that are not interested in transit buses like Jordan is, but they are very interested in street sweepers. And so seeing what makes sense for them, seeing what they want to try out first, depending on how many applications we get that we end up awarding, we'll hopefully have a second funding opportunity or second application deadline in June of next year. Again, we have a total of almost $7.4 million available. So we'll see how many applications we get in January, and we'll see whether or not we do a second round in June. All of this information can be found on DEQ's website, both the RFA for the clean truck, bus, and airport equipment is on there. And then I didn't talk about our clean school bus funding opportunity. That's also up there. That can do diesel, propane, low NOx certified, as well as battery electric. The battery electric cost share is a bit lower, quite a bit lower than what we're offering the clean truck, bus, and airport equipment RFA. So take a look at that. If you know people that work for school districts, work for local governments, or even for businesses or college campuses, encourage them to take a look at it too. Again, this is just for Montana, but make sure that people are aware of it and take a look at it. And I'm happy to answer any questions. We're going to take a really deep dive into the eligibility and the things that we need to get for an application next Wednesday, October 6th at 2 p.m. Mountain. Again, that information is also on DEQ's page. Go to the energy office and then the clean technology page on our website. And hopefully you can register for that as well, or encourage others to do so as well. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Jordan.
Thanks, Neil. And thanks everyone for being here today. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all about our experiences at the University of Montana with deploying electric buses. I used this this presentation title at a national conference, and it was maybe a little bit more appropriate talking to urban audiences, since this is a regional audience that understands some of the challenges of electrification in rural areas. But I think it applies to all of us collectively. Small, rural, and electric, we can do it. There's a path to get there, and the funding opportunity that Neil just described at DEQ is extremely exciting, and it's going to be a big part of the picture of getting us to that vision. Next slide, please. So just a little bit of geography. I'm sure that most people on the call are familiar with Missoula. Missoula, of course, is the second largest city in Montana. Next slide. Is situated in a mountain valley that so Missoula is constrained as far as its ability to grow. We're situated in a mountain valley that is fairly constrained, unlike Bozeman or Helena or Billings or other cities in Montana. We are geographically constrained and not able to grow out. The city has adopted a focus inward growth philosophy, and that focus inward mindset is designed to encourage infill and to encourage development in a more dense manner within the urban core. This valley also traps air quality. It creates inversions and creates air quality problems in the winter. So fleet electrification is an extremely important piece of that. This is a view of the University of Montana campus, and it's a beautiful campus, but it's landlocked. This is a view from the mountain, so we're from Mount Sentinel. So we're surrounded by a mountain and a river and a historic residential neighborhood, And there's really no place to build additional parking unless we want to build up or cover existing green spaces. All of the existing building sites are taken up. So we've got some space constraints. And the next slide shows just a visualization of transportation options. The image on the right is the amount of space it takes to park cars of the same number of people commuting by different modes. So on the left-hand side, you see those people on a bus and the amount of space that takes up, with pedestrians and bicycles in the middle versus parking cars on the right. And this really fits into the university's mission to reduce drive-alone trips to the campus. Just spatially, it fits into the mission, but there's also some economic components. And this slide shows you the cost of building and maintaining a surface parking space. You know, it's relatively affordable. This is per space to put down asphalt and maintain a space. Versus on the next slide, we see that if we start stacking parking decks on top of parking decks, that becomes an extraordinarily expensive way to pay for parking. The average now, national average, is pushing $50,000 per space to build structured parking. And that is particularly, that gets more expensive as you go underground. It gets more expensive as you build in more challenging geographies. And so as a university, we have to either recoup that cost through a user fee or take that out, or that's in direct competition with other budgetary needs at the university. So for us, it's actually cheaper to provide high quality transit and to get students to campus, faculty, and staff to the campus via transit. This U- system is our student transit system, student owned and operated transit system. So I report to the Associated Students of the University of Montana, and the students make all of our programming decisions, all of our budget decisions, and really the entrepreneurial spirit of the student body is really the reason we were such an early adopter of electric vehicles. The next slide shows our route map. We are a capacity overlay to the city's or to the Mountain Line system, which is the regional transportation provider. So we really focus on providing high frequency transit to the university from student housing to campus or between satellite campuses. And the next slide shows all of our student drivers. So this is, we've got a great group of student drivers who are the lifeblood of the program. And like I said, the student support was really why we were able to go to electric buses. We began researching electric buses back in 2014, in the spring of 2014. We, for a number of years, a couple of years, really did researched vendors and financing opportunities and conducted due diligence on different vendors and different product offerings. There really weren't a lot of electric buses available in 2014, and in 2015, late 2015, working with DEQ, we were able to redirect some funds that had been programmed to purchase a clean diesel bus through the Diesel Emissions Reduction Act. We were going to be retiring an older diesel bus, conducting an early retirement and replacing it with a more modern, clean burning diesel bus. And we worked with DEQ to be able, and with the Montana University System Board of Regents, to be able to redirect those funds to purchase two battery electric buses and associated charging infrastructure. We selected Proterra. At that time, it was the only vendor that really met our needs. And we ordered two Proterra Catalyst buses in the spring of 2016. We received those in the fall, and worked to complete our charging infrastructure and launch those buses into service in January 2017. We have about 150,000 miles on the original fleet. That's a little less than expected, and that's primarily due to pandemic service reductions. These buses, I think on a more typical year, we'll put about 20,000 miles per bus per year on these buses. So we had a great event, launched the buses with some fanfare, and then put the buses into service. And we continued to research funding opportunities and vehicle technology. One of the coolest things was that we consulted with dozens of universities and transit providers over the years. We got a lot of calls with people interested in our electric bus program. And continued to work to replace the rest of our aging fleet. So in 2019, we secured $1 million in clean transit bus funding through Montana DEQ and $1.5 million in the low and no emission bus program that Bailey mentioned earlier through the Federal Transit Administration. That was exciting for us. We were the second university to receive that funding. And I think it was really based on building on success. We had a successful electric bus deployment, and we saw over that time, Mountain Line, our regional transportation provider, move to electric buses. They've got a really successful electric bus program that has been developed. And so that initial, early adopter step really allowed us to build upon that success and chase after additional funding. And ultimately, this spring, we finalized the contract on an order for 3 additional Proterra buses. We received those buses about 6 weeks ago. We are currently awaiting charger infrastructure. We've got a few supply chain issues related to the pandemic, and so we're a little bit behind on our charger installation, but we're looking forward to launching those buses into service as soon as possible. This is one of the new buses. They're a little bit of a different model than the previous bus, and they're really a great vehicle for us. Our 2016 buses, we ordered 2 buses, and the next slide shows a contrast between the orders. We ordered 2 buses. Those were 40-foot buses with 77 kilowatt batteries, or 77 kilowatts of onboard storage, and those were charged on an en-route fast charger. So the buses would dock at this en-route fast charger, and it's an extremely high rate of charge. It's a 450 kilowatt charger. And they only have about 20 to 30 miles of range. And so they're charging every time they go by this charger. The charger is at our main music building stop at the university, in between the music building and the business school. Like I said, the buses charge every time they go by, or about every 4.4 miles. So they charge about 2.5 minutes every 24 minutes, or about 6 minutes per hour, and they can run indefinitely in this configuration. Contrast that with our new buses, which have 440 kilowatt batteries and charge overnight, and will be able to complete an entire day of service under one charge. Emissions reductions, of course, was a huge piece of this effort. Next slide, please. The lifetime emissions reductions over the entire electrification program is really quite substantial over the life of the vehicles, and also just the reduction of diesel fuel that we will be not consuming. We anticipate saving about 370,000 gallons of diesel fuel, which is enough to fill our campus swimming pool about 1.5 times with diesel fuel. Next slide. And you can go ahead, Neil, to the next one after, and go ahead one more. One of the benefits of the electric bus program is the community relations. There's a lot of intangible benefits, I guess. And one of those is the community relations piece. So there's all of the financial benefits and the emissions benefits, but there's all these intangible benefits. Our electric bus program has become extremely popular. This historic neighborhood that I mentioned earlier was previously very concerned about transit and was actively organizing against transit. And that was because of noise and emission of transit vehicles. But after the deployment of the battery electric buses, we had former adversarial neighbors become allies for the expansion of service and for the electrification of transit service. The previous slide showed former Governor Bullock at our ribbon cutting ceremony, and we've had great success or enthusiasm from political leaders from our entire congressional delegation. Now, Governor Gianforte was very supportive of our application to the Federal Transit Administration when he was in Congress, and both senators were very supportive as well. So it's just been a really great bipartisan enthusiasm that we've seen. The next slide shows we've had these great outreach opportunities that have come out of our electric bus program. The high visibility of the buses and the high visibility of the charger make the bus system a point of pride for, and they come up on campus tours and youth classes in a variety of different forums. And next, there's a lot of pride in the transit system. This photo is just last week. You can see the bus in the background. This is taking university student employees to a COVID-safe recreation opportunity as a student employee appreciation event. And we're finding that the student body really takes pride in the transit system. They take pride in the fact that the vehicles are electric, and it's been real exciting for us. It's not without challenges. You can go to the next slide, Neil. The electric buses, they're expensive up front. Grants and other financing tools are absolutely critical to a deployment of an electric bus program or an electric vehicle program. We are seeing that operating costs are meeting our projections. Our maintenance costs are down. Our per mile fuel costs are way down. So the total costs of operating the vehicles are significantly lower, but upfront they are about twice as expensive. So that is a barrier. We also have maintenance staff and contractors that need to be trained, and in some cases continually retrained. And that's going to be an industry-wide concern that workforce development and training over the coming years. The industry is growing very rapidly. Vendors change, products change. Technology becomes obsolete. Our on-route charger that's five years old is now not standards compliant with current charging protocols. It'll work for the life of our vehicles, but it is going to be something that may become difficult to support in the later years. And of course, the pandemic has impacted parts and charger availability, and just as it's impacted so many industries, it's impacted this one as well. But all in, the program has been really successful. You can go to the next slide. The program has been really successful, and despite the challenges, we are delighted to have been able to be an early adopter of electric vehicles and to be able to continue to bring on additional electric vehicles. This is 3 of our student drivers and Monty, the campus mascot, at our ribbon cutting of our initial electric buses, and just really goes to show you what something as uninteresting as a transit system to how that can become part of the fabric of an institution like the university. Thanks for the opportunity again to be here today, and I'll pass it over to Kyla.
Great, thank you, Jordan. And thanks to all of our speakers. That was really interesting information and exciting information about what's been happening in the region. Lots to talk about. And it looks like we have one question in the chat, or I see it's a comment from Bailey on link to the Yellowstone-Teton Clean Cities stakeholder meeting if you want to register for that for next week on October 7th. So if there's any questions, you can type those into the chat, or just unmute and or raise your hand, and we can go ahead and try to answer your questions. just call again for any questions or thoughts or comments from any of the participants or any of the panelists to follow up on some of the discussion and presentations. So somebody did ask a question about, can we get a link to the school bus funding information? And Neil, that was in your presentation. We can put that link in the chat.
If people want to go to deq.mt.gov /energy, that'll take you to our main energy office page, and there's a link there for alternative fuels and transportation, and on that page will be links to the PDFs that are fillable for both the clean truck, bus, and airport equipment RFA, as well as the clean school bus RFA. One thing, since somebody specifically asked about the clean school bus RFA, but I just want to note, if you start sharing the word with your local school districts about that funding opportunity, is that due to constraints with the EPA, a school district could apply for electric school bus funding through our clean school bus program. They would be eligible for a grant of up to $148,500 or 45% of the total cost, whichever is less. So that means that the school district, assuming that a new electric school bus costs about $350,000, and the school district was still planning on buying a new bus anyway, and that a new diesel costs about $100,000, the school district would still have to come up with about another $150,000 to purchase that electric school bus. Now they could also, through the clean school bus funding opportunity, purchase a new diesel, use our awards for a new diesel bus, or for a new propane or low NOx certified school bus. But if they were to apply for a new battery electric school bus under that program, that grant award from us cannot be used as match under the clean truck, bus, and airport equipment funding opportunity, because of the way that the EPA kind of set themselves up with the Volkswagen settlement, the way that we kind of structured our original grant from the EPA. We can't use Volkswagen money to match the EPA money that we received. So if a school district is very interested in doing electric school bus, they should take a look at both funding opportunities, but the cost share percentage from the clean truck, bus, and airport equipment RFA is significantly higher than the clean school bus. But if the district does want to stick with diesel or propane, then they should look at the clean school bus, because neither of those fuels is eligible for funding under the clean truck, bus, and airport equipment. So just keep that in mind as you're talking to folks in your community about both of these funding opportunities.
Great, thanks, Neil. That's good information. And like Neil said, there'll be a webinar. It's on Tuesday?
Next Wednesday, October 6th.
October 6th, to go into more detail about eligibility and some of the differences between the two different funding opportunities. So we have a question. The EV charging infrastructure in Montana is pretty sparse. That is true, especially the fast charging. Are there any programs to help beef up the Montana charging infrastructure? I'll also let Neil answer that question. Neil.
So this past January, we had an application funding deadline for what we called the Fast Charger Ride Program, which, like the Clean Truck, Bus, and Airport Equipment RFA, was funded by Montana's portion of the Volkswagen settlement dollars. We worked all summer to enter into grant agreements with the successful applicants. We haven't made announcements yet, but some of them have executed their grants agreements. And we're hoping that with the 15 locations that we funded across the state, that those will be in the ground and operational. The deadline is within 24 months, but I wouldn't be surprised if some of them were online within the next several months, sometime in 2022. Through a previous funding opportunity called Charge Your Ride, we did fund 3 fast charging stations, and those are now fully online and operational. And you can find them through the U.S. Department of Energy's Alternative Fuel Station Locator app or map on their website. Those that we funded are in Polson, just outside of Missoula, and also in Bozeman. And those 3 basically doubled our fast charging capacity in Montana, in addition to the 3 existing Electrify America stations that were in Rocker, just outside of Butte, in Missoula at the Walmart, and then at the Dell Market in Dell. So now we have 6 fast charging stations in Montana. We've awarded funding for 15 new ones. And hopefully we'll see some news coming today from the U.S. House of Representatives. Hopefully they'll take a vote on the bipartisan infrastructure package that, among other things, many other things, includes funding for fast charging stations and level 2 charging stations. So that could be a significant shot in the arm. With our Volkswagen settlement dollars, we do have some money left. We're kind of waiting to see what happens with our fast charge your ride awardees, how quickly they get those in the ground, what funding, if any, comes from Congress. So we have a little bit of money left. So we're hoping that the fast charging map in Montana will look significantly different if you ask that question a year from now.
Great. Thanks, Neil. So then the next question that came in, I would say this is probably for Jordan. How do universities and other government entities choose the companies who provide the chargers? Jordan, do you have insight in that?
Yeah, I don't have a lot of insight into that. I mean, our first purchase, I can tell you about our experiences. Our first charger was a proprietary charging system that our Proterra buses utilized, and it was an overhead charger. So when the bus would drive underneath the overhead charger, and then the charger would connect with the bus, and it was an overhead conductive charge. There was some hope that would become a standard, but at the time it was not a standard. Ultimately, the overhead charge standard has went in a different direction, and there is now an overhead standard, but we ultimately have this legacy charger. As for our depot chargers in our garage for this next round, we stuck with a Proterra branded charger. It's made by Power Electronics, and we we've selected that as part of our bus purchase. I know that Mountain Line has a similar charger. They've also gone with another vendor for additional charging infrastructure. I think that there's one thing that I would recommend is there's organizations out there that partner on these grant applications that specifically will do analysis of charging needs, that will assist with creating RFPs or specifications for selecting a charger. So I think for us, we kind of fell into this based on our timing and the offerings that our bus vendor had. But the nice thing now is that these buses actually, these new buses are completely standards compliant. So we went and charged them at the Electrify America charger just so that we were able to use them until our charging infrastructure is built out. So there's a ton of opportunities, and I would just encourage folks to partner with an organization that can help do that research.
And then, thanks, Jordan. And then there's a follow-up question on what about airports? And I don't have a lot of insight into how airports are choosing their the companies who provide the chargers. We haven't had any chargers installed at airports in Montana to support the electric ground support equipment. There isn't electric ground support equipment currently. So that's a good question.
I would say, Kyla, and also to tack on to the previous question for Jordan, is that Jordan, from my conversations with him, has had a lot of experience and success with the Proterra buses. It's a new company. They do all electric transit buses only. So they haven't been around for, decades like some other transit bus manufacturers have. With Mountain Line, they already have some diesel powered buses from a company called Gillig. They have been around for a long, long time. They're just now getting into the electric vehicle field. And the two buses that we help fund for Mountain Line, again, the Missoula Area Transit Agency, are brand new Gillig electric buses. And one of the advantages there for Mountain Line anyway, is that they're Gillig. So if there is some maintenance, like a chipped windshield, or you need some new tires or some new seats for passengers, it's all the same. There's no special electric powered windshields for Gillig electric buses. It's the same for whether it's diesel or electric. And I think that that's the same in my limited experience so far talking with a couple of airports, is that some of those legacy, if you will, manufacturers of airport ground support equipment are already moving over into alternate fuel and electric powered airport ground support equipment. And those pieces of equipment are small, they're not terribly complicated, and they're already very cost competitive with their gasoline and diesel counterparts. And so in the research that I've done to put together this funding opportunity, is that there are manufacturers out there. And so when you're looking at what makes sense for your transit agency or your airport or whatever, people like Jordan have had success with new companies like Proterra. People are also like Mountain Line, who do have some Proterra buses. They're also interested in the cost savings by getting something from their other manufacturer that they already have diesel buses for, so that if they need new parts for the bus area separate from the drivetrain, that's easy enough to get, whether or not they're replacing parts on the diesel or the electric buses that they have from Gillig or ProFlyer or some of the other things. And the same goes with school buses, Bluebird, Thomas, IC Bus. They've been around for decades, and they're now starting deliveries, or have been doing deliveries, for electric buses. And if your school district uses Bluebird or IC or Thomas, again, the parts are going to be the same for the seat belts or the steering wheel or the windshield or the seats for the kids. So just shopping around and seeing what makes sense for you is probably one of the biggest things that people should do when they're looking at this funding opportunity.
Great. Thanks, Neil. There was a question that came in on using or adding new stations to the DOE station locator. It sounds like Nordic Brew and Bozeman is maybe not on there. It sounds like this person found out how to submit a new station, but Alicia or Bailey, do you have any other comments or suggestions on submitting new stations in that DOE station locator and how long that might take?
It usually doesn't take too long. We can follow up with the technical response service to see about that. That's happened in the past, so we can follow up on that for you.
Okay, great. And then Jesse commented as an answer, there's also an app called PlugShare, which is private, but it does provide it's commonly used for finding charging stations. And there's an app for your phone for the PlugShare app. And it does also allow you to submit new stations. So yeah, those are the two primary tools, the DOE station locator and then the PlugShare app. And you can find level 2 and level 3 on there and filter it by type of station.
And one final point to also the question about the airport ground support equipment, as well as what Jordan's doing with charging his new electric buses, is that regardless of what type of vehicle you're talking about, if you're talking about a Chevy Bolt, a belt loader that's electric powered, a Proterra transit bus or a Gillig transit bus, they all use the same charging plugs. And so Tesla would be the exception. They have their own proprietary charger. And a Nissan Leaf is also a little bit different. But generally, when you're talking about some of these new light duty passenger vehicles that are coming out, or a piece of airport ground support equipment, or a big old transit bus, they're all using the same plugs. And so, you can look around and shop around and probably find a pretty good deal on these charging stations. And if you wanted to take the belt loader out for a joyride, you could charge it at Nordic Works if you wanted to, because it's the same type of plug. So this technology is starting to get very well integrated, and there's going to be a lot more developments, as I said, during the next year, which will be very exciting.
Great. Well, I guess there's one last question, and this is really a great question. Is there anything that we can do to help DEQ or Yellowstone-Teton achieve their goals? And, I would just say, express your interest, ask questions, from DEQ's perspective. It's really, our biggest interest is getting our funding out there for new technologies and technology that helps reduce emissions and meet the goals of the settlement funding, get people interested in electric vehicles. Anything else from DEQ's perspective?
Just spread the word. We'll be at the Helena Clean Energy Expo this Saturday. We'll also, feel free to share some of the social media posts we've been putting up this week for National Drive Electric Week, both on the DEQ Facebook and Twitter handles, as well as the Yellowstone-Teton Clean Cities Instagram and Facebook pages, and just keep on sharing the word and telling people that electric vehicles are here and they can do pretty much anything that you want them to do.
Great. So yeah, there's a final comment that from Angelica, who's a part owner of a Native American-owned EV charging station company. She keeps hearing that there's not enough charging stations across Wyoming and Montana. And, that is true depending on sort of what metric you use. The Federal Highways Administration considers that areas need to have no more than 50 miles between electric vehicle fast charging stations on interstate and highway corridors. And so, the range of the vehicles is improving and has improved significantly over the last few years. But still, there needs to be more ubiquitous charging across both, I would say, Montana and Wyoming. And so that's just something that I think is going to require, public entities, private entities to partner on funding opportunities like we have, as well as Neil mentioned, the potential opportunity with the infrastructure bill, the importance of electric vehicle infrastructure and this transition to electric vehicles is absolutely critical, and EVs adoption won't increase without, enough charging stations. So it is a really good point, and having states with large geographies and small populations is a particular challenge for EV stations and amongst other things. So yeah, we comment noted, and that's just one of the goals over the next couple of years is to try to cover the state. And then finally, I'll just add, if Yellowstone-Teton, I guess we're a little past time, but Alicia, Bailey, do you have any final comments on folks, what they can do to help at your efforts?
I would just echo kind of what Neil had said of just spreading the word about, what's going on event wise. And then as far as getting more stations, and then specifically, I guess, for Wyoming here, because you've been listening to the Montana DEQ, who provides funding for things in Montana, but with Wyoming, just making the Wyoming DEQ aware that you're interested in installing stations or interested in funding, because they have VW funds too, but it hasn't been opened yet. And I think the more interest there is, that expressed interest, that will put pressure on them to hopefully open funding sooner. So and I'll just leave it there. Attend our events and follow our newsletter, and that will share a lot of the information that we have around EVs and infrastructure in the region.
Great. Well, thanks to all our speakers, and thanks for those who are participating in the good questions. We've got a couple great webinars next week, Yellowstone-Teton's stakeholder meeting, as well as DEQ's diving into more details on our 2 funding opportunities that Neil will be presenting on. So you can find out more information from our respective websites. And thanks again, and have a good rest of the Drive Electric week. Thanks, everybody.